Welcome to the Wordsmith Forge Christian Fiction Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Baines. As you may know, this podcast focuses on male authors and the male point of view. I was honored when Christian brother Tim Farron from the Dakotas expressed the value of men writing Christian fiction for men by making me a virtual member of a group he is in. It is called Band of Brothers, Iron Sharpening Iron, based on Proverbs 27:17. So, thank you, Tim, for the hat and for your support of the Wordsmith Forge Christian Fiction Podcast. In this episode, I sat down with Jeremiah Friedli, an author passionate about telling bold, faith-driven stories that speak especially to young men. Jeremiah opens up about the influences behind his writing, the power of fiction rooted in truth, and how his personal walk with Christ shapes every story he tells. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. This is one conversation you won't want to miss. Hello, I'd like to welcome Jeremiah Friedli to the podcast. Jeremiah, would you introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Sure, yeah. So Jeremiah Friedli, I'm a homeschool graduate, lifelong writer, ice cream lover, and native Texan. So I love imagining danger being just about anywhere and then, weaving that into stories. Love getting out in God's creation, whether that's hiking, running, camping, or just sitting on the porch reading. My favorite kind of books, and the ones I try to write, are the ones that just there's such a page turner that I look at my clock and I'm like, oh dear, I should have gone to bed a long time ago because of this book. And if I'm not writing or enjoying pizza or Bluebell ice cream, you're likely to find me hanging out with one of my spreadsheets or hanging out with my family, like watching a movie or just chatting or something like that.
Oh, great. I have noticed that a lot of the younger authors have been homeschooled. Of course, that's something that our older, how do I say that right, or more mature authors didn't have the opportunity. But you guys that were homeschooled, you have some really interesting experiences, and you have a different pace, I think, than kids that went through the meat grinder at public school.
Yeah, there's I think there's pros and cons of each. If you were to try to sit down and say, but you're right, we have tend to have different experiences and backgrounds, but there's a really wide variety just among homeschoolers too, because there's all kinds of homeschoolers and thrusts and philosophies behind that. So, but I personally had a terrific experience. Super grateful that my parents did homeschool me, and if the Lord ever gives me a wife and children someday, that's absolutely what we're going to do, is homeschool.
Yeah.
them. So.
I can't imagine the time and effort that goes into homeschooling your children, but I have nothing but the greatest respect for parents that take that task on and complete it. I know that when the last of my kids left the roost, I looked at my wife and said, we're young again. We can go do what we want.
Speaking of going places, though, that was actually one of my experiences as and maybe fairly unique to my homeschooling background, but because of my dad's work, he had to travel a good bit, and that was actually a key reason why he and my mom chose to homeschool, was because they were like, hey, if we can keep the family together, that would be awesome. And so I have memories of road trip after road trip after road trip as a kid. And I think it was by age, somewhere in my teen years, I'd been to 35 different states in the U.S. So it was. I'm just like, I grew up doing it, so for a time there, I didn't realize, oh, not every family does this.
Yeah.
But it was a terrific experience, and I, looking back on it, I'm feel incredibly blessed.
Yeah. So you live in Texas. Have you always lived there?
Yes, sir. Born and raised.
Well, you must have some places close by that you like to frequent, places that you can kind of just sit down and refresh your soul.
Yeah, there's kind of depends. Like if you're talking about something like closer and fairly accessible, I mean that could be, certainly Sunday morning, going to church and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's some huge blessings there. But as far as a little bit more of a getaway alone kind of thing, it would often, assuming the weather permits and the insects aren't too much of a problem, it'll be just like sitting on the front porch,
Mm-hmm.
And then. If there's a little more time available, one of my favorite things to do is get away to the Rocky Mountains. And so I'm in the West Texas, and so kind of depending which part of the Rocky Mountains you're trying to go to, it can be anywhere from just like say 4 hours to maybe 8 or 9 hours drive to get away and get a nice change of scenery from basically flat lands where I am right here. It's almost a desert where we are right here. So yeah, it kind of depends how much time there is available. I love the mountains, though. That's totally my kind of getaway.
Well, to kind of help us get a better idea of Jeremiah, what are 3 of your favorite songs?
Ooh, it'd be hard to nail down 3, but. So some of the ones that came to mind first would be hymns. I love hymns. There's so many great hymns, and you look across church history. So there's one called "Hallelujah, What a Savior," also known as like "Man of Sorrows."
I know that one.
Just so rich and chock full of just theology and Christ's work for us. In fact, I would venture to say there are few songs written in the last 100 or 150 years that rival how much the author of that hymn packed into just one line or one phrase in there. And some of that's just stylistic changes and that kind of thing. But and then similar to that is another one, I Stand Amazed in the Presence. That's another one that speaks a lot of just Christ's work for us and what he's done and our position in him. And then Nearer, Still Nearer, probably another well-known hymn there, but that one just, I think of that almost more as an aspiration. Like that is, I desire to have that kind of closeness to God that hymn talks about. I'm certainly not there, but that is the kind of relationship I long to have with him.
Yeah, I agree. Those kinds of hymns encourage us and inspire us. So let's take it another step. How about now, just, they don't have to be your all-time favorite or anything like that, but the first 3 movies that come to your mind.
Okay, so this is not going to sound terribly close to what I write, but there's a animated film called Ratatouille.
Yeah.
I don't know how long ago that came out, but that's so much fun. Yeah. And I think part of that is that it's one that my family has seen together multiple times.
Right.
And so there's that shared memory, those shared quotes from the movie that we get when we say them and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's definitely more of a lighthearted one. Another one I really enjoy is the Hunt for Red October. There's a language warning there, so but otherwise it's a pretty clean movie, and I just love the intrigue and the pacing of that one.
Yeah.
It's got that thriller vibe to it for sure. Some espionage going on there and that kind of thing. And that's the kind of story I'd love to write and read. Assuming we clean it up, from the language that's in there. Yeah,
you're not the only author that has named the Hunt for Red October.
Interesting. Okay. Wow. It must be a popular one among guys then, I guess. At least guy authors, right?
Yeah, we're guys. We like stuff like that, and because it's intense, and it's well paced all through the movie. There's a lot of good things to be said about not just the storyline, but the technical direction of that movie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then I guess another good one that's really, this is more kind of just from like an inspirational angle, is Gifted Hands. Tells the story of Ben Carson, and this was made well before his foray into before he got into kind of more of the political arena and that kind of thing, and I saw it well before then too. So that's kind of when I got hooked on it, and I didn't even know about this guy. And then someone in my family was like, "Hey, you got to watch this awesome movie," and it is so inspiring. Just a terrific story, true story about. I mean, on one angle, you can think of it as a rags to riches. It doesn't quite show him as, it's not presenting him as, hey, look at the wealth he achieved by the end of the movie. That's not the thrust, but that is one angle of it. But more importantly, someone who went from not really having much like desire to make anything of himself to this top-notch surgeon in the, and really sought after internationally. And just how he faced these different challenges and pushed through them. That to me is just really encouraging and inspiring to see how you touch lives, how God can use you to, if you're willing to work, let Him work in you, to grow and go in who knows what amazing, fascinating direction He may take your life.
And you think about what was the motivation for Ben. I mean, it wasn't to become rich. He wanted to do that work, and it just so happens that work pays well.
Yeah, he tells a funny story. I've heard him speak. I have the privilege of hearing him speak a couple of times, and I'm sure I'm not going to get the story exactly right, but it goes something like, when he was a kid, he's like, and I was like sitting in church, and I'd hear these stories from missionaries and stuff like that. And he thought, man, it'd be so cool to be like a missionary doctor, but before that, let's see, what was, I'm already butchering the story now. Anyway, he's like, what am I going to do with my life? He's like, wow, these, psychiatrists, they look like they have these really nice cars. They seem to live really well. And this probably before Ben Carson was a believer. Yeah. And he's like, and all they got to do is just sit around and listen to crazy people all day. And then I think it was after that, he's like, you know what, actually, I want to be a missionary doctor. And then obviously things took some different turns since then. But it's interesting that doctor seed, so to speak, was planted years ago in him as a boy.
Yeah. I've seen people interview him, and he remains steady, calm, unruffled, tells it like it is. Yeah.
Okay, so if you don't mind a quick diversion,
go ahead.
Throw this out there. Take it or leave it. But I'm curious, if you wanted to go for a round two, we talked about favorite songs and favorite movies.
Yeah.
If you want to share like 3 favorite games and 3 favorite ice creams?
Why not? Yeah. What are 3 of your favorite games?
Obviously, I had a little time to prepare this, but Scotland Yard. I don't know if you played that before. It's
No.
a board game, and if you might enjoy it if you like something thriller-like stories, because it's basically you have this Mr. X who's in London trying to get away, and then you have the Scotland Yard agents who are trying to track him down. Super fun game. Kind of definitely got that spy vibe to it. There's a card game, Dutch Blitz. There may be like a playing card version of that as well. I just know it from the box. And then chess. I love chess.
Yeah. What about your 3 favorite ice creams then?
And that's one of those where it truly is really hard to narrow it down to 3. But I'm an ice cream lover, so I'm always exploring new flavors and that kind of thing. But chocolate chip cookie dough, it's definitely right up at the top somewhere. Butter Crunch is another one, and these are all Bluebell specific flavors. I don't know if you're familiar with the brand Bluebell.
Yes.
And then Christmas cookies. I try to eat that one pretty much year round, though. If I can stock up enough around the holidays, then I can almost get enough to get me through the whole year eating Christmas cookies ice cream.
Jeremiah, tell us, if you don't mind, tell us about your walk with Christ.
Yeah, well, started around age, I think 12 or 11. I don't remember specifically what year, but I do remember specifically this instance when I thought I was a believer, but growing up in a Christian family, sometimes there's a little bit of a challenge there because you know how to talk the talk and that kind of thing. But many blessings to growing up in a Christian family, of course, too. But and so I was actually like preparing a testimony to give, and the gentleman who was helping me with that was like, "All right, so tell me about how you became saved." And I was kind of like, I really don't remember. And he's like, "Hey, that's all right. Let's fix that right now." Yeah. And so that is what I think back on. Like, that's when I know for sure that like I accepted Christ. And so a while ago, every day is trying to draw closer to Him. It's still a challenge, but that's good. If we didn't have challenges in our lives, it wouldn't push us to draw closer to Christ.
Certainly.
And I know, at least for me, I would get lazy, apathetic. I mean, I already have enough of a problem with that, with the challenges of life. I can't imagine it. But there are just so many, scriptures that challenge us to draw closer to Him, and so many that comfort us and remind us that whether it's Christ is trying to draw us closer to Him, or sending some sort of testing or trial our way, or whether it's a time of discipline, or maybe it's in that beautiful, lush green valley that Psalm 23 talks about. It's like with the still waters, or whatever you can imagine there. That any of those situations, He is there with us, leading us, guiding us. And there's everything I've experienced so far, and obviously the Scripture says so, which is even more important than what I experience, is that there's never a time where God leaves us, where His care, His provision is not there. We may doubt it. We may think, oh, because I can't see it, it's not there, or something like that. In fact, just thought of this as I was talking about that, and there's a book recently I finished reading for the second time, actually, called Trusting God by Jerry Bridges. Terrific book. Highly, highly recommend. But there's this one quote that I've been kind of just mulling over and thinking about. He says, "The sovereignty of God is often questioned because man does not understand what God is doing. Because He does not act as we think He should, we conclude He cannot act as we think He would." And so that's just been one I've been kind of thinking on and dwelling on a little bit, and just like, I'm so prone to, at times when it gets hard, especially, to doubt God and what He's doing. It's like, no, it's just because so much of that's because it's my limited perspective.
Jeremiah, what sparked your calling to write Christian fiction, and are you sticking with that, or is it a passing fancy?
Yeah, interesting you should say the sticking with it and passing fancy. It has definitely stuck with me. I started writing, I don't know exactly how old I was, but as a kid. And if you want, I can share this picture with you later, but there's this my first published book. No. It's self-published. Yeah. By myself, with paper, construction paper, masking tape, and staples. Yeah. And I illustrated it myself, and it's very child looking. It looks like something I self-created. It's like 5 sentences long, called 20 Doorbells. And so somewhere back there, as a very young kid, I was interested in creating stories. The illustrative side of it has never, probably since then, has not really ever taken off or taken me anywhere. I'm not good at that side of it, but it's like, I think a number of authors out there, it's been hard to kind of turn off that creative, that story creation side of the brain. And if you're a writer and author, you understand what I'm talking about. But it's yes. It's kind of just one of those things where it's like there's always some story idea. So if I look across the years, I mean, there's times when that interest kind of ebbed and flowed. Yeah. But very often I was writing stories, and of some type or another, and some of that, of course, was as part of the schooling, right? My homeschooling mom, would gave writing assignments, but that's where I would, when it was a creative one, not the book, not the report whether it's a book report or a report on a nation or, some scientific topic or whatever. Those were where I was kind of like, oh, okay, I can try to make this work. But when it was creative of any kind of nature, it might be that she would be like, okay, 5 pages, fanciful fiction. And I'd come back with like 20 pages or something like that.
You were an overachiever.
Yeah, I was just like, I couldn't, like, it's like I wanted to do so much more with these these creative ideas I had going around in my mind. And so that went into, I can't remember when my first like kind of novel length manuscript was created, but it's probably somewhere in like the teen years, which, as kind of a side note, that's also when I really kind of fell in love with reading. I know that sounds kind of weird that I was writing, but not necessarily a lover of reading. But somewhere a few years though after that, so I'm guessing, late teens, early 20s or something. I sensed the Lord kind of saying like, okay, Jeremiah, if you're spending this time on writing, two things. You either stop spending time on this if it's not going to be anything other than just this, like, self-indulgent hobby or whatever, or you need to make it count for eternity.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when I look back and see a significant shift. I kind of went from just writing just kind of for fun or for myself to, okay, let's learn the craft. Let's understand, what makes a good book, what makes a good story, how to craft compelling characters, how to create fascinating plots, and so on down the line. And then I started learning about publishing and how all that works, and how do you find a publisher, or there's this thing called self-publishing, and anyway, so it wasn't like I quickly became published right after I kind of sensed that call from the Lord to make the writing more purposeful. But it still took a while, and many times I was wondering, like, Lord, why don't you let me get published now? Like, I've been trying to learn this, purposefully and all this for a while now. Like, can I get published now, please? And it's just kind of, he kept saying, no, not yet. We're getting there, And now that I did finally, like, the official publication date of the first novel was earlier this year, and now, as far as like, I think I had a Kickstarter crowdfunding campaign that happened the prior year. So anyway, either way you look at it, last year was when it officially published. And now I look at that and I'm like, wow, there's a lot that hits when you like actually like publish. Yeah. And I'm so glad that God didn't let me publish any sooner than that, because I really wasn't ready. And I didn't feel super ready even when I did publish, but by His grace, I'm here today and I'm learning, and it's definitely constantly learning, as you well know, when it comes to this writer journey.
Was there a biblical truth or a passage that anchors any of your books or one of your books that we're talking about here?
Yeah, the actually, interestingly, that quote I shared earlier from Jerry Bridges, part of that was because the kind of the thematic element of the book that came out earlier this year, the stuff that I've published so far, and the sequel that I'm working on now, all those is kind of that thematic element of fear, and what does the Bible say about that? And I would say if there was kind of like one verse that really, that like the novel Core Deception really kind of pivots on, or is kind of the theme verse, it's Mark 5:36. Do not be afraid, only believe. And so really the root of that theme goes back to what happened in 2020. Probably know what I'm talking about. A lot of us remember this, COVID pandemic thing that came. And so basically there was a lot of my, life, as is the case with probably most others in America, that was definitely disrupted or just, thrown off and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, and especially earlier on, for me, it was kind of like, well, what's this, what is this COVID-19 thing and all that? And so I was facing I found myself dealing with these fears that it's kind of like they kind of just surprised me and caught me off guard. I mean, I've dealt with like other fears, not saying I've completely conquered them, but other fears in the past, like fear of failure or, fear of acceptance or, incompetence. I think that's a big one for us guys. We feel like, well, what if I don't come across as competent? But during 2020, it was this different kind of fear. It was like this fear of the unknown or, this strange disease. And before long, I just really felt, I'm sure it's the Holy Spirit, kind of nudging me going like, this is not something a Christian should be, caving to. I shouldn't have fear like that if I believe what the Bible says is true. And not too long after that was when I came across this quote by Max Lucado in another really good book. I'm not trying to get on here to recommend books, by the way, but they just came up in the conversation. His book is called Fearless. And this quote just really jumped out at me. It said, fear at its center is the perceived loss of control. And I was like, wow, that is exactly, like, he nailed it. That was what it was for me. It was like, I felt like I thought I'd had control, and this pandemic craziness hit, and suddenly it's like all these things got out of control. And so that's what I ended up, at the time I didn't realize that was going to be part of this book. And interesting how God works, right? But then as time went on, I just felt the Lord impressing, like, hey, you need to put this fear theme into your book. And so that's what the main character in that book has to kind of figure out, is like, even though things get out of control, it's like God still says, do not be afraid, only believe. And that's what God told Jairus, or Jairus, I guess, depending on kind of how you pronounce it, there in Mark 5, who came to him, to have his daughter healed. And it seemed like Jesus was, at least one way to kind of, I'm speculating a little here, but I'm trying to put myself into Jairus' shoes. It seemed like Jesus was kind of taking too long to get there. He's like, he came to him, it's like, hey, she's about to die.
Yeah.
And then, there's this crowd there, and they're thronging him, and this other woman comes up, and she needs to be healed, and thankfully she is healed, and all this, and then somewhere right after that, someone shows up. It's like, hey, don't bother Jesus anymore, because your daughter's dead. Yeah. And I could totally see at that point Jairus, based on his words of kind of like, hey, come heal her because she's about to die. Yeah. He thought, he didn't realize that Jesus raises from the dead. And so it's kind of like, I can imagine his mind thinking like, oh, it's over. It's all is lost. And yet what Jesus said was, do not be afraid, only believe.
And if only Jesus had picked up the pace, he'd have been there in time. So, a guy told me once, I forget who it was, said this, but Jesus is the slowest person he knows that's always on time.
That is awesome. I love that. Yeah. Like he did with Lazarus. It was kind of like the same, in a sense, the same story, but also kind of not, because he deliberately waited until days after Lazarus' passing to raise him from the dead.
And he also grieved.
Yes. Yeah.
So
there's a story related to the novel I'm working on right now that's related to that. But speaking of Jesus' timing, whether it was Lazarus or Jairus and his daughter, it's like the human perspective, like from my perspective, or Jairus's or Mary and Martha's, it's like Jesus wasn't on time or didn't act in the way they thought. But what those stories teach us, and what this teaches us about fear specifically, is that what seems to like be out of control or things have gone wrong from human perspective is not that way with God.
So we call out, Jesus, don't you care?
Yeah.
But he does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's actually another thing that was pointed out in that book, Fearless by Max Lucado, is that like fear has that way of making us think Jesus doesn't care. In the midst of the fear, it's real easy to think like, Lord, like when the disciples were in the Sea of Galilee and the storm hit and Jesus was sleeping, they're like, don't you care that we're perishing? And so fear has a way of doing that, and or it makes us not think, like forget God's faithfulness and his promises in the midst of that storm. It's kind of like, wait a second, you disciples, don't you remember these other awesome things Jesus did, even up to that point, and it's like that seemed to kind of have been forgotten in the moment. Exactly.
Well, many of our listeners are looking for books that reach boys, men, or an entire family. Do you feel that your book connects in that way with that audience?
Yeah, that's and I specifically write towards like the young adult genre. So like teen guys especially is who I'm trying to think about when I'm writing these books. And of course I've had people definitely younger than that read and enjoy the books. That people older than that read and enjoy the books. So it's certainly not limited to that.
Right.
But yeah, I do sense that there's kind of a there's kind of a couple points. If there's time, I'll address kind of regarding your question there. There's just kind of thinking more kind of to the industry and that kind of thing, the writing and book industry. There's a little bit of a chicken or the egg thing going on there, in my opinion, where publishers look at data and it says, oh, girls read a whole lot more than guys, so we will make the majority of our books geared towards girls. The guys see that and they're like, well, there's just a lot of books for me, so I'm going to go find the video game instead, or whatever else it may be. And then the stats come back and the publishing industry says, oh, even fewer guys are reading books. Well, let's publish even less that are geared towards them. And so it can be this spiral. Yeah. I'm sure that's not 100% true in every single aspect and everything. And there's a lot of guys, including indie published guys, who are reaching that market. But so there's a little bit of that going on. I think that's created part of that problem. But there's also this is definitely a bigger topic, and there's a article or a blog post I can share with you if you want afterward. But it's geared more towards writers, but it's kind of like this whole topic of like how fiction should be trying to reach guys and that kind of thing. That I ran across this, like I think it was earlier this year, and I was like, oh, this is so good. I love this. But so there's that. There's kind of just that industry side of it, and that can, to an extent, be a self-creating problem there. But then I think there's also this other piece. Like I definitely, as a guy, I enjoy reading books about. It's not like I can only read books about guys, but I really do enjoy the books featuring the male protagonist and that kind of thing. But it's not strictly just, oh, is there a male protagonist in there? It's also like, is there, I don't know, are they doing like main things to an extent? I'm not saying they all have to be someone out in the wilderness, surviving on his own, or whatever you fill in the blank you may, your idea of manly or whatever. But we touched on this earlier when we mentioned why is it maybe that a lot of guys enjoy maybe that something for Red October or something like that. And you kind of mentioned it already. It's like there's that kind of that intensity situation. There's this battle to fight and wage. And not saying that books that aren't geared towards guys don't do that, but there's also, that's got to be a key part, I believe, of a book that's going to connect with a guy. And are trying to like defend or fight for something. I'm not saying it always has to be something in the physical realm. It might often be something in the physical realm. But there's just something about me and other guys I've met and talked with this about. It's like we just know that we're supposed to be some kind of like defender or fighter or warrior, and that we're supposed to encounter these daunting conflicts. Now we don't go out and see normally, but like there's something about reading a story about someone facing like a daunting obstacle or conflict that resonates with us and makes us want to say like, give me more of that, or let me see how does this guy navigate this. And and I really personally have a heart for, I'm still do it, but how to write stories that really kind of like give an example of what godly manhood should look like and should be. And that's still seeking out myself, trying to figure out myself.
Yeah. Sure. I looked over reviews of your of your book, Core Deception. The reviews, if I can just condense them to one word, with my apologies. Your book is exciting. Your book is fascinating. It's engaging. And here's two words, an attention grabber. So you've got a lot of good reviews there on your book that I'd say would keep people coming back for.
Thank you. That is definitely the hope.
And also one reviewer mentioned one of your named Kristen. Is she one of your main protagonists?
So Core Deception, the main character is Seth, and his sidekick, if you will, is Kristen.
Okay.
And she's actually also featured in, I have a prequel novella, so kind of a story that's kind of the story, but a little bit of the background behind the novel Core Deception. And that is, she gets to have the spotlight in that story. Free, by the way, that novella is free from my website if you want to go there and grab that as an ebook.
And that is called Association?
Yes, sir. What I've heard and found to be true myself, so far as I've been kind of observing it, is that in general, I will mostly pick up and read books that feature like a guy protagonist.
Yeah.
Girls will they'll go for the guy or the girl.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the reason I wrote the Association novella was so I could have some sample of my writing, and so I just kind of took one of these characters and made it, kind of told her backstory. But I wouldn't have guessed not too long ago if you had told me, like, do you think you could write a story with a girl as a female, as the protagonist? No, I wouldn't try that. Too risky. But
it is.
One thing led to another, including some good writing friends who were super helpful in making sure that I didn't, way off track there, and it wasn't true to character and that kind of thing. I've received, been blessed with definitely some encouraging words about that.
Dan Walsh is one of the authors I interviewed, and he has he's got a lot of books out there, and things past his wife, and his wife often says, a woman would never say that. A woman would never think that.
Yep.
So going to use a female as a protagonist, we better have a filter there.
To someone to cross-check us and make sure.
Bet. Yeah. Well, do you see your writing as a ministry, as a mission, or a message to get out, and how so if you do?
Maybe all of the above.
Very good.
Again, that calling, from God to take this, whether you call it a talent or just something I really enjoy, and just to clarify from what I said, is now a more purposeful thing that I do versus just something I do for fun. That doesn't mean I still don't enjoy it. In fact, I texted some of my writer friends the other day. I was like, I can't believe I get paid to do this. This was so fun. I was working on one of the codes related to one of my books or whatever, because they've got some codes in ciphering. But yeah, what I strive for the most, and I'm borrowing this from Jerry Jenkins, who put it, something along the lines of, if your reason to write doesn't boil down to because it's obedience to God, eventually, you can get disillusioned from that. You could, if you're writing for other people, praise, for example, then there may be this one book or this one story where you don't get as much praise as you thought, or none, or criticism for some sort of just personal, outlet of fun or whatever. Well, that maybe you could run out or something. So, and he put it much better than I did. I remember him saying that. I was like, you know what? That's right. That needs to be my why. It needs to be because this is what God's telling me to do. I certainly hope, kind of back certainly hope and pray and believe that it will touch people's lives, and specifically my prayer is that it will believers in the Lord to live more courageously for Him, to strengthen them in their walks with the Lord.
I realized that I wrote Christian fiction because I'm a Christian, and how wasn't. As you've been writing, has there been any lessons that God has taught you?
Yeah, I would say a lot.
I always think that's such a hollow question, and then people say, "Oh yeah."
Oh yeah. And perhaps to an extent, it's like any life calling, or maybe even any job, or really any ministry. I mean, I think about my what I kind of refer to as my day job, and that there's plenty of lessons I've learned from that. So in the absolutely one of them seems to have definitely been a recurring one, and I kind of hinted at this earlier, talking about kind of how I went for fun to sensing God's calling to be more purposeful, to then eventually actually publishing. That waiting on God's timing is one of the big ones. Those who thinks about, like, I like to kind of know what the roadmap is, and so I look at it and go like, okay, so in my mind it makes sense that I should publish by this year. And it's kind of like God's like, well, you came up with that, I didn't come up with that. And so with so there's unexpected things, or new things to learn, or different turns in the direction of the writing. So many times it's been like God's kind of like, okay, so this is not what you expected, but this is what we're doing. We talked about this earlier, about God seeming to take too long to act sometimes, but He's just on time. That sort of thing going on.
Yeah, man, God sets His feet.
Yeah, and then in the kind of more specifically, like to just the last few years, as I've been working on the core series, Core Deception, which you were reading some of the reviews from earlier. That one's published and out there and everything, and as we mentioned, the theme there. I've definitely, as I mentioned, that was definitely something that is teaching me and had taught me, that made its way into the book and equal. So the second novel in the series, that's also going to have a fear element, but I think we'll see plans. But so far, from what I can tell, it's going to be kind of more of this instead of fear of losing control kind of thing. It's a little more of that fear of overwhelm. Yeah. And what has been, shouldn't be surprising, but has caught me off guard, and what's really amazing, surprised me, is that over the last especially 12 months, I've been really like getting more focused time on novel, that I have felt overwhelmed so many times. Whether that's a little bit of that's at the day job, but most writing this second book, and it's possible, the enemy, the devil, doesn't want me to write this, but also it's like I'm supposed to be writing about this fear over situations, and even though I don't like this way of learning about me, okay, you want to know what it's like to feel overwhelmed? And so but it pushes me closer to stop trying to do it on my own, and I look to Him, and so now I'm working on this story. I'm like, okay, it wasn't pleasant going through loaded or overwhelmed. A lot of that was relating to one published and getting it out there and all that, but I've got stuff for you right here in your present day life, and you can use this in your book.
Yeah, so. Definitely. Would you say that any of your characters?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Probably elements of me. I mean, probably to an extent. So I would think your writers who are getting their first stuff published would they'd probably see a lot of themselves in those characters. So Seth, the main character in the core series, there in Core Deception, that would to me, and then but I can see elements of me in other characters as I think that's to an extent that's when you think about it, God's fingerprints are all over, right? And it's like
sure.
I think you and Philip Wilder interview earlier,
right.
It's like I was talking about his touch is everywhere. I think to an extent any creator is going to end up doing that, whether
yeah. Well, you come up with one sentence that would convince to read your book. One author said, yeah, go out and buy it. It's fairly straightforward.
Right. Me, it seems like I came with. I'll say like, hey, like hacker goes up against this big brother government twister.
Yeah.
So
I feel like we sell your book. We've talked about all kinds of different things, but we have dug into your book to let people might want to purchase it. But personally, I think it's more important to find out about the author. And Jeremiah is pretty interesting. He's got some experiences. I bet his book is packed full of good stuff. So I guess if you'd like to take a little time to quickly talk about your book, this would be a good time to do it.
Thank you. Yeah, so it basically has this world with it of this series there, Core Deception specifically, but it has kind of dystopian like government. Just basically imagine we've had another ice age that has hit the globe, our away future, and so Seth grows up on Hawaii, but it's not the tropical paradise. This is actually Hawaii, where because of this global ice age, it gets 3 weeks out of the year where typically.
Ow.
And yeah. So, and he grows up in where, in the name of like efficiently running ice age, there's, just the and watches everything all the time, tells everyone, dictates everything. And to an extent, he can go with that until, he doesn't like it, but he kind of has no choice, right? Until is taken in for this what's called normalcy testing, and everything Seth knows breeds bad. This is not going through this special testing, end up and put in re-education, and he's like, I've got to do something to stop this. Resorts to his hacking abilities, and specifically though, what really kind of ignites things and sets things off from a friend who passed away earlier in the story. Tells him about these super secretive devices, basically think like cyber master keys, that will let him do anything he needs to. He doesn't have to worry at least about how well his hacking can be properly covered up so he can't be traced. So that's when Seth joins Kristen and on these hidden cyber master keys to save his sister, save his family from this government coercion. The codes and ciphers and espionage. A lot of I love like Cold War of it,
yeah.
And so definitely you'll see some elements of with a futuristic flair, but get woven in.
Yeah, super. Well, Core Deception, I hope that check your book out and buy a lot, Jeremiah. And where can people find your?
Yeah, just go to jeremiahfriedli.com. there. You can sign up for my email updates there. You get a free ebook that'll let you connect with me. If you feel free to just email me now. But yeah, it's all there at jeremiahfriedli.com.
That on the screen. Could we? Great. Our Heavenly Father, we just we praise you as you are the master of the universe. Everything happens because you. We thank you for the imagination that and for putting on paper for others to explore. So that you continue to bless him with what your plan in his life is. We just appreciate you spreading. We thank you so much, Lord, in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Podcast today. This has been a great conversation.
I've enjoyed it, and if it wasn't for you, Christian, podcast. So again, on, and great rest of the day and week. Take care. Joining us on the Wordsmith. If Jeremiah's story struck a chord with you, a review to support his work. If you're enjoying what, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment. Until next time, stay grounded, stay inspired, and as always, keep reading clean. Out.